Hello and good evening. I'm Sister Jen Schaff, and I'd like to welcome you to our second lecture of the season. You're invited to submit questions through the link that was sent out, bit.ly/STM lectures. The link is also posted on our Facebook page. It's my pleasure tonight to welcome Sister Jerilyn Hunihan for the Mary Field and Vincent DeP Goubeau lecture on women's contributions to church and society. Sister Jerilyn exemplifies the name of this lecture as a woman religious and chaplain. Working with people who are imprisoned, she brings care to those who are Catholic, to those of other faiths, and to those who have no faith. Sister Jerilyn joined the Apostles of the Sacred Heart of Jesus in 1973. Since 2007, she served as the Connecticut Department of Corrections chaplain on the Religious Services Unit at Hartford Correctional Center, an all-male short-term facility, and at the MacDougall Walker Correctional Institute in Suffield. Sister Jerilyn has a heart for connecting art and faith, which she builds into her morning prayer and her Bible studies with the prisoners. She was an educator for 35 years, teaching students in grades pre-K through 12 in Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, and Missouri. It's my pleasure to welcome Sister Jerilyn as she engages the topic, Signs of Hope, Art and Faith Inside Prison. Please welcome her.
Thank you, Sister Jen, and the St. Thomas More Faith Community for the gracious invitation to speak with you tonight on this topic of art and our incarcerated brothers and sisters and the impact it has on all of us. Before I begin, I would like to just give you 4 facts, some of which you might already know, some you may not. We're not going to discuss them, but I think it would be good to say them before we begin the presentation. The United States imprisons the most people per population of any country in the world. For 17 years, our U.S. federal prison system has not executed any prisoners. In July 2020, there were 3 executions within a week of the federal prisoners, with 4 more being scheduled here in September of 2020. Most prisoners will return to society. Only about 5% of prisoners should remain in prison and not return to society. Persons living with drug addiction, alcoholism, homelessness, and mental illness make up a significant percent of the United States and Connecticut's prison population. Is prison the best place for them to get the help that they need? One of the first things a person learns when you go for training for the Department of Correction is that you learn that the prison is a mini society. And so all aspects of society are represented within the prison walls. So you have college graduates, high school principals, not high school principals, high school dropouts, construction workers and teenagers, women and men, guitarists and bakers, etc. And this is important for the rest of our time this evening. I've come to celebrate and to know that each of us and all of us have yearnings, desires, hopes, and regrets. Whether we find ourselves behind the walls in prison or outside the walls in society. I've gleaned much from the prisoners and the folks in the jail, and I share these with you tonight. I've become a better person by interacting with the people I serve within the prison. The major religions of the world, if you think about them, they believe that the earth and the universe was created out of love by the Creator. We might call that Creator a different name, but we are created and we are a creature. So it makes sense, don't you think, that we mirror the beauty, the holiness, and the life of this Creator. Humans exhibit a wealth of creativity in many avenues: music, dance, design, poetry, the written word, and drama, and the list goes on. This is what unites us. No matter the color of our skin, the country of our birth, the religion we profess, we have an inner likeness from which we can celebrate these gifts. I have witnessed these gifts within the walls of our Connecticut prisons. So this evening, we're going to ponder and consider 5 pieces from the Prison Art Collection, which is sponsored by a nonprofit, the Community Partners in Action Prison Arts Program. And they have been most kind, and the artists and the poets I'm going to use this evening have given permission for their pieces to be shown and their poems to be read. I wouldn't be neglectful if I didn't thank Jeffrey Green, the director of the CPA Prison Arts Program. He models exactly what I'm talking about this evening. Jeff brings out the unity in his artwork with the students that he has been working with for 28 years in our Connecticut prisons. So we're going to consider the individuals who have spent time in prison. I'll share a little bit of their story and each piece. You'll be able to view the pieces with the help of our cameramen, which is, I'm grateful for them as well. Then we will have a question or two for ourselves, just to ponder what are we seeing or what are we thinking about that particular picture. So before we do that, as a opening prayer, it's really a poem, but I guess we could call it a prayer. And I preface it with, time in prison can offer an individual the opportunity to reflect on life, on how to forgive others, and how to forgive oneself. So that's kind of what this is about. The poet, his name is Hank Messenger, and it's titled Father. I loved you. I loved so to fight you. I did all that I could just to incite you. I despised you and scorned you, unable to see the things that you wanted, your vision for me. To be a good worker, to be proud and strong, to take the road less traveled, the one that is long. The old man's a fool, I said to myself. I know that I'm right. The old man is wrong. I thought I was winning this battle we fought. All I was losing, I had no way of knowing. In my mind, I was gaining all that I sought. The damage I did was not then yet showing. My course was downward, battles they raged. My father he weakened while quickly he aged. I went to prison as surely I would. My father never buckled in his hope for my life. He said I would make it. He knew that I could. In prison I turned to the law of the knife. I lived for the turmoil, tension, and strife. I was in a prison the day that he died. 6 months later, I broke down and cried. It came out of the blue, a sudden attack. It had finally sunk in. Dad wouldn't be back. I never got to say goodbye in any formal way. I was in supermax security on my father's funeral day. For all the fights and battles, even ones I thought I won, I knew I was the loser, the ever-repentant prodigal son. What a fool I had been with all he had to tell me. I thought he was a dummy with a bill of goods to sell me. Now I long to ask him questions when full of pause or doubt. He had held out all the answers, his knowledge never ending. There was so much he had lived, so much he knew about. I just wouldn't listen. My ignorance unbending. But when I have a question now that's really on my mind, my father visits in my dreams, and we get along just fine. It's such a story at the end for a resurrection, really. And I guess I would just want to comment, even after the grave, it's possible to have mercy and forgiveness. It's a good reminder. Hank gives us a good reminder for that in our own lives. All right. So we're going to move now to 5 pieces from the permanent collection. And we're going to go to the first piece, which is actually untitled. This piece was done in black and red ink on Bristol board. The artist is Angel Gomez, and he completed this in 2008. So when the offenders go to class, many of the classes are pretty strict for the art program, and there are certain assignments that they must complete. It's not just go and do tattoos all day, or something that they did out on the street. So for this particular piece, the Angel Gomez was asked to draw something that he is concerned about, something that he's worried about. And so he's a dad. And so this piece that you're looking at right now, his daughter is there in the foreground, and she looks like she's sitting at a table, and she's there, and the Blessed Mother is there. Maybe they're having a conversation. Maybe she's praying. And in the background, you can see red in the drawing. And what Angel did was he drew the things that he worried for his daughter. So you'll see, for example, a hospital bed with, the person in the bed and someone who is sick and ill. There's some drug paraphernalia there in the back of the drawing. He even has bed bugs that he's fearful of, for his daughter. Being a father, being a mom doesn't end when you're in prison. Many of the folks that I see care very deeply about their children and want to be part of their life. So our question maybe for us, for those of us who are parents, grandparents, foster parents, if you babysit, if you are a teacher, a coach, what is your desire for the young people that you are with? What are your hopes and your dreams for your children? These are similar to, I'm sure your dreams are similar to what Angel Gomez was for his daughter. Our second piece is a colored pencil on paper. It's entitled Still Sucking Wind. The artist is Curran Sands, and he created this piece in 2004. In this case, the assignment was to draw something about how love was expressed in the home. And as you're looking at this piece, you can see his dad. This is a portrait, a picture of his father. And take a look at the expression on his face. And quite important in this picture is the fist coming out at you at the picture. And he's got tattooed on his 4 fingers there, Love, love. And for Kerwin, that was how his dad expressed love. We know that violence begets violence, right? This certainly is not an excuse or taking the responsibility away from anyone who's committed a crime. But I'd like to just remind us it is important to try to understand how a crime can be committed and what does a person's upbringing have to do with that. And so we ask a couple of questions for us. Do you have memories from being a child that are sad or scary? Do we take the time to try to let go of those experiences and heal from them? Notice Kerwin calls his piece, he was an adult when he drew this. He called it Still Sucking Wind. Now, I have to be honest, when I first saw that, I didn't know what sucking wind meant. So if you get punched in the chest, it takes your breath away. So this happened to him when he was a child, but still as an adult male, he was still sucking wind in the memory of it. Our third piece is colored pencil on paper. This is a self-portrait. The title is Prison, Mental and Physical Hell. The artist is Lester Allen, and in 1996, he created this piece. He too was asked or invited to create a memory for him and make that connected to his experience in prison. Now, I'm not very good at accents, but I'm going to try it here. Lester grew up in Georgia, and when he was a little boy, the families would get together and they would go to a park or a backyard and they would set tires on fire. And he was 5 or 6 and he remembers the burning heat, how hot it was, and it scared him, So he would say this, he says, "In Georgia, nothing hotter than a tire fire." And he spoke like that, all the time. And you kind of listen. You'd listen up when somebody would speak. But this, if you take a look, when you look at the picture, you can see that it's a self-portrait. He's there in the cage. It's like a bird cage. And it's hanging on a pole. He can't get out. He's locked. And then if you take your eyes down, you can see at the bottom where his feet are, the tire is there and the fire is coming up, And that's how he explains his experience in prison, mental and physical hell. Lester had that memory of the tire fire. What memories do you have from being a child that formed you, that impacted how you live your life today? Our fourth piece is pastel and collage on paper. It's also a self-portrait. It was created by Jennifer Brown in 2009, and it's entitled "The Ashes of Empty Dreams." I would like to be quite honest, when I first saw this piece, I had a very hard time even considering the topic of empty dreams and this young woman. If you take a look at it, that's her like kind of kneeling, half kneeling on the ground. And her body is so small in comparison to the weight of those unfulfilled dreams that are weighing her down, that the black ash at the top. And to tell you the truth, it haunted me for quite a number of nights, wondering, what it was, what were her dreams that were dashed or never came about. Do you or did you ever have a hope or a dream that was dashed? Maybe you had several. Have you or are you able to create new ones and acknowledge either your own failure or the failure of others in not having your dreams come to fruition? I'm going to share now the second poem, which I think complements the ashes picture. The poet, her name is Kelly Donnelly. And try to imagine when I'm reading the poem what she is experiencing. This is called "The Day I Disappeared." It was night, the day I disappeared, vanished without a trace, into a thick, dark forest. The path leading in was tangled and overgrown. Briars and sharp thistle clawed at my skin, but I didn't care. I was already wounded and broken beyond repair. So I trudged on deeper and deeper, searching for an opening, a place where the stars and heavens above could bear witness, a place to offer up my heart. So I placed it on the altar of the moonless night and set my soul on fire, torched by guilt and shame. Like logs, I threw sin after sin into the burning blaze. I collapsed onto a mound of cool moss and wept until there was nothing left to give. Like wisps of smoke, I drifted into darkness, and I became one with the night. But soon the great light of dawn came and touched my shoulder, with her delicate fingers. And I began to lift my head, and the sky opened its bright blue window, and the dove took flight. And I rose to walk among the charred remains of what once was. And in the distance, in a small clearing, a tiny flower stood alone, inviting me back to my belonging, back to holy ground, back to the sacred, the garden of my life. Again, this is someone who uses the time of incarceration to ponder and to think. And for Kelly, she shares the story of how she disappeared that day, right? But then as you finish her poem, it's such a resurrection poem. Almost you can picture her putting sin after sin into that fire. What a great image, for all of us to be able to let go of those, the things in our life that we're embarrassed about or that we're sorrowful over, that God just wants us to place them in that fire and just let them burn and then come and be resurrected. So our fifth piece is colored pencil on paper. The artist is Edgar de Jesus. He created this piece in 2014, and he calls it Mercy. I personally do not know the story behind the picture. So we could probably imagine, what happened. And so this is kind of my interpretation of it. And feel free to think about what you would see in the picture. Certainly the word mercy is pronounced there at the bottom of the picture. And so you see a young man, and he's looking out. He's got a teardrop, a red teardrop on his face. And he's doing something with his hands. I'm not really sure if he's, groping for something or perhaps praying. The woman, if you look closely enough, you can see that she is in a big teardrop. And she appears to be blowing a kiss. So we don't know the relationship between these two people. But certainly Edgar provides us with much food for thought as we contemplate the word mercy that dominates the drawing. As faith-filled people, we believe in the mercy of God. And do we cultivate mercy toward others and toward ourselves? Can we offer mercy to the one who has hurt us? I'm going to interject here. If any of you went to any Catholic worship services this weekend, the gospel was about the landowner and how he went out during the day and he hired different folks to work. And at the end of the day, he paid all of the workers the same wage. And it appeared in that story, there was this unrest with the people who were hired early in the day. There was this, disgruntledness about them. The landowner was merciful. And sometimes I think when I witness someone who's merciful, I'll say, why did you do that? You didn't have to do that. And yet that is really what we're called to do. Perhaps the young woman is blowing the kiss to Edgar, you know? We don't know. But certainly it's a piece that can help us to consider, you know, can we gift someone to this day or in the future with the gift of mercy? So that finishes the 5 pieces from the permanent art collection. And we're going to just take a moment to look at the poster board that is to my right, your left. So this piece is 3-dimensional. The middle piece is 4 feet tall, and the other 2 are 3 feet. So we're using the poster to kind of show you what they look like. The artist is Jesus Rios. His story is probably one of the most tragic stories I've learned in my almost 14 years within the prisons. And yet it's also an absolutely amazing story filled with giftedness and joy. So Jesus was a young teenager. He had a brother and a mom and dad. There was a crime committed. He did not commit the crime. His mom and dad told the police that he did commit the crime. It was his brother who committed the crime in reality. So Jesus went to prison being an innocent person. His folks knew that he was challenged in some ways in school, in life, physically, emotionally, and they really thought that he would be better off getting the meals there and maybe going to school, and for whatever reason, they chose to have him take the fall. So he was in a cell, a single cell, and one day an officer, the officer was making his rounds, checking to see if everyone's okay. He looks into the cell. He sees 2 inmates in there, 2 people. And he knew it was a single cell. He was like, what's going on here? So he opened the door, and he discovered that on the bunk bed with Jesus was a cardboard cellmate looking like a real person. So he was like, this kid is supposed to not, have it all together. He's not supposed to know anything. He's got talent. So instead of, giving him a ticket for contraband, because when you make things like that, that's called contraband in prison, and you can get a ticket. This officer went to Jeffrey Green, the artist, the art teacher I've told you about. He was teaching at Osborne Prison at the time, and that's where this took place. He said, you got to meet this kid, Jesus. So that's when Jesus met Jeff. He began taking classes in the art program. And he just blossomed into this absolutely creative artist. And so the pieces in this poster are made of cardboard, and then he took the bed sheets and he took the threads out one at a time, and he created a sewing kit, so to speak. And that's how he puts them together. He sews them together, and then he paints them. So there's no roof on the houses. And guess what he calls them? He calls them God's houses. There's no roof. You could see the beauty of the sky all the time. There are no closed doors. They're all open. Every house he makes has open doors. And when you look down into them, there's these staircases going up and going down. And what I heard, I've never met him personally, but what I've heard he always said is that he always wants people to be able to get it, go up and down with God. You go up and down with God. And I just wanted to use that this evening because isn't that a great image? God is with us when we have to go up a staircase and when we have to go down a staircase. His presence is with us, at all times. This piece was actually created in the year 2000. And I'm told that Jesus is using his art in a professional manner and is doing quite well. So I'd like to thank you for this evening, for allowing me to share a little bit of the art, maybe some reflection in our own lives with the art. And if you are interested in anything, in the spring of 2021, the Prison Arts Program in Connecticut will have its art show at the Mark Twain House in Hartford, Connecticut. This year's show was postponed due to COVID, so we'll have a combined 2020-2021 show at the Mark Twain House. And it's a great thing to see if you have something to do, and we're open to do it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Jerilyn, for your insights on beauty, on unity, how we reflect the image of God, and the transformative, redemptive experience that's reflected in the art pieces you brought tonight. Again, I invite those who are watching to submit any questions through Facebook or through the website bit.ly/STM lectures. As we wait for the questions to come in, I do have a couple to get us started. So after having taught for so many years, I'm wondering what makes you interested in prison ministry? How did you make the shift? Was there some particular story that brought you there?
Oh, sure. I'll say it real quick. So my older sister, Marilyn, was going to Southern Connecticut State College at the time. It wasn't a university. She was in a criminal justice class, and one of her assignments was she had to write to prisoners in Joliet, Illinois, in the penitentiary there. And so my sister, she's 6 years older than I, and so she would write to these two men, and she would let me read the letters. And something about it just really clicked. And so I asked my dad if I could write to these two guys, they were in for life. And he said yes. I don't even know how he said it. Yes, tell you the truth, but he did. So I was in 7th grade, 8th grade, I started writing to them. And I did that all through high school. And I don't remember exactly a day that I thought this, but looking back now that I am working with prisoners, I knew that one person could make a difference. That's what I learned from that experience of writing the letters to the men. I never met them in person. And so from that, when the opportunity, I started to then volunteer in prison when I was teaching at Sacred Heart Academy here in Hamden, Connecticut, and I started tutoring at New Haven Jail. That's kind of how I got my feet wet. And after a little bit then, I did also go to the prisoners to the women in St. Louis, Missouri. And then the counselor supervisor here at New Haven Jail, he called me one day and said, there's an opening at Hartford Jail. You have to go interview for this job, And so I got permission to do that, and that was in 2007. So it's a long story for an answer, but.
That's wonderful. I mean, as you're talking about transformation, I think how your own story is transformed too in your experiences and what you've witnessed in your own life. You were talking about the drawing by Angel Gomez and asked of our audience, what are your dreams? I'm just wondering, how would you answer that, especially for the men that you're working with right now? What are your dreams for them?
That's a great question. My hope for them is that they do they complete their time successfully and safely. And I wish for them to return to the community, having hopefully reflected on their own life's choices, good and bad, and be able then to enter into society and become a happy and whole individual. That would be my wish, yeah.
So we have a question that came in from Sarah in New Haven. I noticed the pieces are pencil or pastel or collage. Do artists ever use other mediums like oil or watercolor?
Oh, great question. Yes. There's watercolor. They use wood. Actually, soap is a wonderful medium in the prison. They save their soap and they mold it into all kinds of things. If you know what ramen noodle soup, those little packages and Dorito bags, and they fold those bags and they interlock the pieces, and they create handbags, baby boots, all kinds of things with that media. Anything they get their hands on. They'll buy those Jolly Ranchers in commissary, the little candies, and then they melt them down and they remold them into like miniature trees or dogs and things like that. So they're extremely creative with other things than the pieces that you saw this evening.
When you're talking about the piece by Kerwin, you're talking about the fact that art is one way to process the difficult aspects of life. So in your work with the Bible studies or the morning prayer, I'm wondering how are other ways that you encourage men to process their own lives through prayer? What do you encourage them to do?
And how, let me just understand your question. So for them to help themselves? Sure. Well, some simple things that, I've learned along the way, just simple journaling, being able to write down your thoughts, maybe writing a letter to someone that you hurt, even though you might not be able to deliver that note to them or mail it to them. I remember, I haven't had too many of these experiences, but I remember a gentleman who came to see me, and he was in his 50s at that time. And I remember him saying he was in mourning. And so I thought there was a death in his family. I wasn't sure. I hadn't heard. And what he shared with me was that 25 years before, he had actually had a girlfriend, and she got pregnant. And he encouraged her, forced her to have an abortion. And this is 25 years later. He certainly hasn't seen her in those years. And at that time, he was grieving the child that he never knew. It just kind of came up within him. And so, I asked him if he wanted, he could name the baby. He could write a letter. So I just try to, as best I can, to help them. If they have mental issues, then we have a great mental health unit at the jail, where they could also, be assisted with different things that they're dealing with. I encourage them to read, go to school and things like that, to help them.
I have a couple more questions that have come in. This is from June in New Haven. What kind of training did you receive to become a prison chaplain?
So when you get hired by the Connecticut Department of Correction, whether you're a teacher, a nurse, an officer, a chaplain, the training is in Cheshire, right near, not too far from Cheshire High School, up there on Route 10 in Connecticut. And I had 110 people in my class in 2007. I was a lot younger then and a lot slimmer then. And we had 10 weeks of intense training, classroom training, physical training, like a lot of physical training. I think I lost 20 pounds in that time. We were doing so many things. So as far as the specific training was the 10 weeks that I had with my colleagues. And then in the religious services unit, we go and meet with our coworkers, other chaplains and the director of religious services, and we have training in other faith traditions and their practices, because we do even though I'm a Catholic chaplain, I'm a chaplain for all of the men. So we do a lot of training in-house with learning about the traditions and the sacredness of different items in other religions.
Great. We have a question from Fred in Hartford. Do any of the artists go on to have professional careers in the art world?
Yes, I personally don't know any, but Jeffrey Green keeps me posted when we have the prison art shows. He gets many former prisoners who are out in the community doing quite well with art, and they are quite successful. He's had them come to guest speak at different places. I know last year there was a wonderful permanent collection display in at the Aldrich Art Museum in Ridgefield. If you've never gone there, it's a great museum. And I was lucky enough to be part of a 4-person panel. And there were 2 gentlemen that were successfully doing art and doing quite well financially. They were also part of the discussion as myself as a chaplain, and then we had a court judge was with us as well, and we just fielded questions together, and those gentlemen were doing quite well. So yes, I would say that some do go on to be successful.
Now we have a question from Sophia in Brantford. You talked about this a little bit, but do you notice any recurring themes over the classes you've taught? Themes of faith or of prison? What stories come through in multiple ways?
Do you think she means like real stories or something? I'm not quite sure I understand what the stories would be.
Maybe, so just any recurring themes in your classes. So whether it's, you talked about redemption a bit, you talked about beauty, so are there themes like that tend to come through?
Yeah. I don't know if this is a story, but I'm fortunate to meet with the men at Hartford, and when I worked at York with the women, I get to meet them when they're not drinking, they're not using. Hopefully they're on their meds if they have live with mental illness. So I have the privilege, as do other chaplains, where we could meet that person, and that's the real person that we're meeting. We're not meeting the person who's high, who's stealing to get drugs, who is abusive at home. I don't know if it's a story, but certainly I have been introduced to some very, very good people because I see them as they are, and sometimes at very low points in their life. And I would say that's probably one of the things that really moves me, is to really get to know that person. And I wish that their family could see them at that point,
So I think we'll have this be the last question, but since you're working with art with the prisoners all the time, do you have a particular favorite medium of art yourself, or do you participate in the art or just facilitate others using the art?
Oh, I like to play with art. Yeah, I like to use, believe it or not, coffee filters and India ink. It's real simple. You wet the coffee filter, place it on a paper towel, and you just take the India ink, just take one drop at a time, and you just let that drop kind of make its way on the coffee filter, and you can mix and match colors. And then when it dries, the piece underneath sometimes more beautiful than the actual piece, in my opinion. And there's something there spiritually there for me, that the underneath can be more beautiful than the outside. I'm still kind of contemplating that myself, but I would say that's my most fun thing to do, actually. Thank you. Thank you.
I think that's one of those things that we probably all did at some point in elementary school, is coloring coffee filters, but to actually turn it into beautiful art takes a little more practice and work. So thank you all for joining us tonight, and thank you, Sister Jerilyn, for being with us. We invite you to tune back in again on October 4th, when Jesuit Father Patrick J. Ryan will look at the use of violence in religious history during the Morehouse Lecture, as he addresses the topic, The Louse on the Bonnet, Violence, Intersubjectivity, and the Need for Repentance. Thanks, and have a good evening.